Statler, Lips, and myriad of other Muppets. Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Whitmire.
Thank you all for coming here. It's really nice.
I'll start this off before we pass over to the audience.
What's that?
I'll start this off before we pass it over to the audience. But how did you first find your way into puppetry? I know it was very early on.
It was. Let's see. I think the first puppet show I ever did was actually about the second grade. And the teacher brought us in and said, I was 7, and she said, we're going to make, you know, the paper sack puppets, like the brown paper thing? You can make a mouth out of the bottom fold. And I did some character. I think it was like a lion. It was probably really terrible. And when we did our little puppet show, I said something that my classmates laughed at, and I thought, oh, feels kind of good, you know. And but then my real passion for puppetry happened when Sesame Street came on the air in about 1968 or 69. I was 10, and I just fell in love with those characters and with the Muppets at that point, and just wanted to know how it worked. You know, I was too old for the curriculum, kind of, but I just watched the show every day.
I read that you actually first started working at the World of Sid and Marty Krofft.
I did. Yeah, it was a short-lived theme park in Atlanta, in a building that's now the CNN Center. It's where CNN broadcasts from. But it was an 8-level indoor theme park. The only time anybody that I know of has ever tried an indoor theme park, and it didn't last very long. But I worked there from the day it opened to the day it closed. I call it my first professional puppet job. But it was great fun.
So I guess the big question is, how does one find their way into the Henson Company? Was it an audition process?
Well, at the point in time when I came in, it was the 3rd season of the original Muppet show back in the late 70s. And I was just barely out of high school. I was 18. And I met, how many of you know who Carol Spinney is, or was? Carol just passed away. Yeah. One of my favorite people in the world. And Carol was in Atlanta for a puppetry festival. It was a super small kind of convention. And I didn't even know these conventions existed, but I went to this thing because I wanted to meet someone who worked with the Muppets. I wasn't even thinking about a job. And I guess I was the only person there who had puppets that were Muppet-like puppets, Muppet-style puppets, you know, the moving mouth and the eyes that were like the Muppets' eyes and the rods with the ends, you know. And, you know, I met Carol, and it was a thrill for me, and I never thought I'd hear from him again. And about 4 months later, he contacted me and said that Jim Henson was looking for new puppeteers, and he thought I should get in touch with him. And so that was how it happened. I was kind of recruited into the group. And Jim hired a couple of new people at that point. Work was starting to really build up for Jim. It was the Muppet Show, and that was super popular. About to do the films and going to do things like Dark Crystal and those things.
Who was your favorite guest that you got to work with on the original Muppet Show?
Favorite guest? That's a really hard question because there was a lot of them.
Yeah.
I came in the middle of the Muppet Show, so I guess over the course of that time, I probably worked with, 200 celebrities over the course of that time. But I had some favorites. My very first show was with Alice Cooper. Yeah, it was great. So I was 18 or 19, and it was the height of his popularity at the end of the 70s, and of course I was a huge fan. And I was a former, long-haired rock and roll guy in high school, and so I got to work with Alice Cooper my first week on the Muppet Show. And he was incredibly friendly to me. And the great thing about Jim Henson was that I was this new young guy who was completely new to the whole process, had never been in anything as big as that. But Jim immediately began to treat me as though I was just one of the people who was there all the time. It wasn't like I was the new guy who didn't get to meet Alice Cooper. I mean, I was immediately welcomed into the group, so I spent actually quite a lot of time. I think I was maybe the only guy there who actually knew Alice's music, because I was such a super fan, The close to that story, if I can tell you real quickly, some of you may know, at the Louisville Galaxy Con last year, Alice was there, and we had run into each other a couple times over the years, but it had been 20 years. And Alice and I redid a photo that he did with me when I was there on the Muppet Show with him. So it was almost 40 years to the day that we did the original photo. We did that photo again of us now. So we both survived 40 years. It was great.
There were two other music icons you worked with over the course of your work with the Muppets. One is David Bowie on Labyrinth.
Yeah.
The other on Muppets Tonight, you got to work with Prince.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Prince was amazing. Let me tell you about Prince first, because we I was also a huge fan of Prince. This was the Purple Rain days, so Prince was a really big deal. And he was coming in to work with us, and we were all thrilled. But we were kind of told, you kind of need to don't look him in the eyes. It was one of those straight, leave him alone. He likes to be, don't bother him. And so, we took it very seriously, and we're on set, and we're working with Prince all day, and then he would go sit in his director's chair kind of in the middle of the room, and people walked all the way around him. And I thought, well, this is just stupid. So Dave Goelz, who's the puppeteer who does Gonzo and many other Muppet characters, and I just sort of thought, this is stupid. So we went over and started talking to him, and it was ridiculous. It was like a publicist or something who thought we shouldn't bug him, but he really wanted to connect with people. So he was a totally different kind of person than what he was portrayed to be. And I just loved meeting him. Very quiet, but he seemed to love the Muppets and really respond to them. And then Bowie was what an icon. And I was again a massive fan of his music before I met him. Just to hang out with him was amazing. He very personable, very approachable. He did not particularly care to talk about himself. He didn't need for you to say, "Oh, I'm such a big fan. I love your work." And of course, I was a complete fanboy with him. To the point where it got silly. I was over the top. But he really, he didn't, it wasn't that he didn't appreciate his fans, it's that he didn't need to hear from them, because he was doing his work because he loved his work. And he would have done it if he didn't sell it. He was just enjoying his time, So it was really better just to connect with him on a different level. Well, outside of the work in a way,
That's awesome. All right, we have plenty of people who have questions.
Yeah.
So, what's your favorite Muppet besides Kermit?
Well, so favorite that I perform? Is that what you mean? Of my characters?
Besides Kermit.
Yeah, besides Kermit. I always, as a kid, as a little person, how old are you?
9.
Well, when I was about 10 is when I really got into Sesame Street, and I was very drawn to Kermit as a character. I loved that character. But from a performer standpoint, my favorite one to ever perform was Rizzo the Rat. Very different kind of character than Kermit. So, Kermit could be very pure, and he was your best friend who lived next door. And then, okay, so I had enough of that for the day. Now I get to do Rizzo. But the funny part of doing Kermit was, when I sort of inherited Kermit, it became the thing I did all the time. And so I didn't get to do Rizzo and the other characters very much anymore, because Kermit was in everything all the time, which is great. That was wonderful. But whenever I got the chance to do Rizzo at that point, I was really sinking my teeth into having fun with it. It's a good question. Thank you.
Just real quick, obviously, the reason why you ended up picking up the role of Kermit and Ernie was because of the passing of Jim.
Yeah.
What was the process of getting that role? Was there an audition process for this?
No, there wasn't. It was unexpected. Jim died suddenly. He caught a virus that was a deadly virus, and he was otherwise a very healthy person. So it was unexpected. And Jim we never did understudies, or it didn't make sense to do that in the Muppet world, because, if you say, well, okay, we're now getting to do the understudy for Kermit, what do you do in the meantime? What does that person do until, I die? Maybe they kill me off and take Kermit. I don't know. But it didn't really make sense. So we just rolled with that situation. And I guess what had happened was, evidently Jim, who was trying to sell his company to Disney in those years, at the early 90s, had said, if this sale goes through and we sell to Disney, I might be so busy as a creative person that I might not be able to continue to be Kermit. So I guess he mentioned to a couple of people he was thinking he might say, maybe Steve does this, which is a great compliment for me, a great honor. So that's how it happened. He had just mentioned it in passing. He never mentioned it to me. It was a surprise to me. So no, it wasn't really about audition. It was about, I always called it like a linear passage of, lineage. It's like any lineage where a person who does something designates the next person who will follow, which I think is kind of right with Muppets,
Next one.
What is your favorite Muppet movie out of all of them?
Well, the very first one is a real favorite, the original with Rainbow Connection and all that, because I was 18 or something when I worked on it, and I just joined the Muppets a couple months before, and everything was new and wonderful. And it was also Jim's first feature film with the Muppets. So that one is real special, and probably right alongside that is Muppet Christmas Carol, because that was yeah, it's a great film. And it was the first film where I really played Kermit on anything major, so that was wonderful. It's a great film, so I like that one a lot too. Thanks.
Was your mind as blown as the rest of ours when you saw Kermit riding a bike for the first time?
Well, I was, it was fun because I was willing to do anything they asked me to do, and one of the things I got to do was have Kermit riding the bicycle. It's super simple. I mean, people ask, but it was just, a small bicycle with Kermit attached on top, like a stuffed version of Kermit. And then we were in what they call the cherry picker, these big giant cranes that held put you about 30 feet in the air with 2 long pieces of fishing line. So it was, and the problem was that if you didn't keep the exact, because we're moving on actual dirt ground, so it was up and down and up and down, and if you didn't keep the right tension on those 2 pieces of monofilament, it would fall over because it wasn't balanced. It was a real bicycle, And so that was the challenge of Kermit. And I think the shot you see of him riding along the road is probably out of maybe 40 takes was the only one that worked. It was really hard. Simple but hard.
Next question.
Hello again.
Yes, sir.
I got a question.
Sure.
Were you Beaker doing the Feelings Mimi song that I shot? I've been sending this all around the world, by the way. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
Was that you or someone else?
The Feelings.
The Feelings.
I did not do Feelings because now Richard Hunt was the puppeteer who actually originated Beaker.
Okay.
Richard passed away in 1992, a couple years after Jim. So we lost 2 of the major guys at that point. And as it was with Kermit or Ernie, I kind of inherited Beaker. So I did not do that one. I did everything since then, but yeah. That's an amazing piece though.
That's hilarious.
I think that may be the first time Beaker sung a song, And what a great song for Beaker to
I
sing.
send it on YouTube all the time.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, we did some others since then with Beaker that were great fun, like, I don't know, we did Ode to Joy, and where he's singing 9 parts, and crazy stuff, I love Beaker.
Did you have to figure out exactly how to moderate your memes too?
And we actually sung in that voice. And the thing about Beaker is, he does that high-pitched sound, if you know Beaker. But the way Richard always did that was not, I couldn't do it right now if you asked me to, I'm so hoarse. But it's not, you're not pushing air out, you're pulling air in through your vocal cords. So it's like, ooh. Well, I almost did it. But so try singing that way. I mean, try hitting pitches that way. But it was pulling air in, so you have to exhale before you do Beaker, and then pull all the air in.
With the resurgence of practical effects in film and television, with popular projects like Dark Crystal, Ancient Resistance, are you seeing a change in the industry and how puppets and Muppets are approached and how they're produced and managed?
Well, really honestly, in the industry as a whole, I guess I'm slightly out of the loop because I'm focusing so much on my own stuff right now. I know what I'm doing, and I was always in favor of, my sense is that Jim would have felt the same way, because he was always embracing all the new technologies. I think he would have wanted to use, CG and computer enhancements of what we were already doing. I don't think he would have replaced the Muppets with that. But there's some things that are awfully hard to do with that hand puppet. And while we were always very pure about the puppetry, we wanted it to be puppetry, he was doing green screen stuff back before anybody actually knew how to make it work well. So is the industry changing? I don't really know. I think there's a focus on people realizing that regardless of whether you can do as much with puppets like Yoda or whoever it might be, as you could do with a computer-generated character, there's a place for it. And I think as fans, we can see the difference. And there's something about knowing that thing is there next to the actor and it's not done after the fact and it's all real performance time. I think it adds something to it that you can't always get out of a CG character, But I think they both have their place. But I quite love the idea of doing characters, and like if you want a character to walk across the stage, that can be hard to do. You can do it with puppetry and green screens and all that stuff. You could also, animate the legs, and I think that's acceptable. The Muppets we kind of work from the waist up. Part of the illusion for us was to make you hopefully accept that there was a ground down there that they were standing on, that we played them so that you felt that they were against something, even though they didn't exist from the waist down most of the time. I don't know whether I actually answered your question or not. I'm hot around.
So we'll work on your own stuff. I'll go take a moment to plug your current interactive.
Sure. Oh, I'd love to if I can. Some of you know about this if you've been by the table, but about 6 or 8 months ago, I started doing a monthly live stream with a new character called Weldon the IT guy. And Weldon, who I don't have with me today, is IT for Weldon stands for Internet Troll. So he's this little curmudgeonly little creature who lives in a cave all alone, and he hacks people's websites, and he's a troll. He's an Internet Troll. Only he's an actual real troll. And the point of the show is for me to be able to do what I always love to do with Kermit or the other characters, which is to interact with people as we improvise and just play. And sometimes it's funny and sometimes it isn't. But it's enjoyable. So every month we do a call-in live stream show on YouTube where you as a viewer can call in and talk to Weldon. And what Weldon wants to hear is your most miserable experiences, because he's a troll. He thrives on your misery. And he takes your side on it, and those people are terrible, or whatever. But we've been having fun, and the other thing I've been able to do is some sort of Muppet-like production numbers where Weldon plays all the roles. I only have the one character, so Weldon is like a cosplayer. And he dresses in all the costumes, and we shot some pieces with part of the cast of Gotham, and with the Stranger Things kids, some of those guys. Lou Ferrigno did a piece with us. Next month we're doing a piece with Brian O'Halloran, who's here at the show. Weldon basically interviews Brian as a candidate to be a troll, So the next one is Friday the 27th of March at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard. So you can find us on YouTube. If you search Weldon the IT guy on YouTube, it'll pop up. And you can see the past stuff we've done, plus that you can tune in for the live show there as well. So I'd love it if you guys did that. I'd love to get a following. And I need people, it's funny because if you're like me, you don't always have time to be where your favorite television show, you might watch it later. But what I need is for people to call live. So any of you who want to actually be there on that Friday night and call, I wouldn't get to everybody, but over the course of time, it's nice to have actual callers. Because that's what the whole show is. So keep that in mind. That'd be very cool.
Next.
Steve, first of all, thank you for joining us here in Richmond.
Oh, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
My only question is I was hoping you'd share one of your favorite Jim Henson memories with us.
Oh, wow, God, so many. The first time I ever met Jim, he had gotten in touch with me through Carol Spinney, I think I mentioned that, and said, I want to bring you to New York and we'll meet. And he had almost guaranteed me a job with the Muppets in some capacity before we ever met, which is kind of interesting, based just on Carol saying, this guy really loves the Muppets, and that's all he had to go on. And I think I sent a videotape of some stuff I had done, which was pretty bad. But he basically said, I can tell you, I want to bring you to New York, and I can pretty well guarantee you I'm going to give you some job with the Muppets. He thought I might be working in the shop building puppets. I never really did that. But when I got to New York, one of my favorite memories is the first time I ever saw Jim face to face. I had gone to the office where they had this little obscure sign above the door that said Henson Associates. And Jim, it was way too early in the morning. They didn't get things going around there till about 10. I think I was so excited I showed up about 8:30. And so I'm like trying to get in the door. And the door flew open and it was Jim. And he had spent the night there. His hair was all messed up. He had worked late, stayed overnight, and was sweeping the stairs. This is like the height of the popularity of the Muppet Show, and the guy who owns the whole company is sweeping the stairs. But that's Jim, He was hands-on on every part of what his work and his company and everything was. He's a very humble, simple person who just happened to be this kind of creative genius,
That's awesome, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
I actually have 2 questions.
Okay.
One is, you told me earlier today that you got a lot of fan mail and you kept it all. Where did you put it?
Well, I got some of it, and my more recently, it's kind of started to overflow. So I'm just keeping it and just filing it away. I've got it in boxes and files. And my Comic-Con, the person who books me in Comic-Con is my agent, Tim, is keeping some of it. But I just kind of wanted to hang on to it. People will sometimes bring drawings and photos and little things, and I try to hang on to all that stuff, you know. Yeah, it's a lot of stuff. It's a lot to store.
No, my other one is, like, I know you play a lot of big characters, but what is your favorite, like, smaller Muppet thing?
You mean like lesser known kind of thing? I did this weird character back on Muppets Tonight called Mr. Poodle Pants. Somebody must know who he is because you clap. He was this strange, he was a weird character. And he came from a guy named Kirk Thatcher, who's one of our writers and directors and puppet designers who's been around forever. Kirk's a terrific guy. And Kirk is also a zany character person. He's not a puppeteer exactly, but he's also done some acting. And he did this, do any of you know who Ed Wynn was? He's his actor, yeah. He would do this Ed Wynn character voice. And because he wasn't really a puppeteer, they wanted me to do the character, and I kind of figured out some version of the voice. What we really should have done is trained Kirk to be a puppeteer, and he should have done it. But I had a lot of fun with that character nonetheless, and you know, you probably never heard of him. It's a strange fellow, Mr. Poodlepants.
Hello.
Hey,
What is your favorite Muppet song?
Muppet song?
Yes.
Oh, probably Manamana. Yeah, I never performed that. It wasn't a song that I performed as a character at all. But from my fan years, you know, it was always great to watch Manamana because of what Jim and Frank did with it as they were performing it. They took this song, which had nothing to do with the Muppets, and turned it into this classic thing. There's another one they used to do on variety show too. There was a trumpet player named Al Hurd who did a song called Java. And they had these two little loop characters that, a little tiny one and a big one. At the end, the little one blows up the other one, you know. All those classic Muppet sketches from those early days, I think, are amazing.
I have another question.
Yeah, sure.
What was your favorite Muppet movie or film?
Oh, that's a hard question because they were all so much fun. I actually have to say I quite enjoyed the last one I worked on was Muppets Most Wanted. Excuse me, because I got to work with Tina Fey so much, who's amazing. Kermit was locked in prison for most of this film, and she was in the Russian gulag, and she was like the commandant of the gulag, and she's just an incredible person to work with. She's so great, and we had such fun. Those scenes in particular were really a great memory.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
How long did it take Jason Segel to stop gushing when you first started working with you guys?
Jason Segel gushed, and so did Ricky Gervais, who was a part of the other one. Ricky's a terrific guy, and he would walk on set and just start laughing so hard we couldn't shoot. It was just like laughter of excitement. It wasn't that anything was funny, it was just that he was so excited to be doing it. Just a great person. Yeah.
Hi, I do the Spark Richmond Theater Company.
Yeah.
And I got to work with Paul Williams last year and the year before. What was it like working with him, and what was your schedule like doing the first Muppets movie together with him, and how did you all come up with singing the songs and writing them and doing all that stuff?
Yeah, well, Paul, as you know, wrote the music for the first film, and he did a lot of other music with us over the year. Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas, he did all the music for that. Yeah, he did the music for Muppet Christmas Carol. So we've had quite a lot of work with Paul Williams, and some of the guys even more than me. Paul's a wonderful person, and he has such insight. He's like a Muppet himself, you know, he fits right in. I used to joke with Kermit that they exchanged clothes, you know. But Paul's great, and I don't keep in touch as much as I should. Once in a while, we've had a little contact. In fact, I think it'd be very cool if he came to Comic-Cons. I don't know whether we can do it. I'm going to pursue that. Paul and I could do Comic-Cons together and do Rainbow Connection or something. Yeah, that'd be fun.
Another part of that question is, did he hand you the song? Did you sing them, or did he have any certain way you had to act or be around him when he was doing the songs?
He would write the songs in advance, and he had such a good sense of the characters that they were always right for the characters. And then we usually will pre-record music prior to shooting. We'll go into the studio and record all the music. Mostly, and sometimes we'll go back and sing it live, but mostly we don't. Mostly we're lip syncing to the songs. And the process with Paul generally was that Paul was always in the recording studio, with us. And we're in front of the mic, and he's in the booth, and he's giving us notes, and he's helping us learn it. And he's there to help you run along the way. I mean, to coach you through the singing. None of us are outstanding singers, but we get behind these crazy character voices, and it's more as much about character as anything else. But Paul's great. I mean, if you worked with him, you know that.
Yeah.
He's a wonderful guy.
Because I think we saw him, he was just starting to lose his hearing.
Oh no, I didn't know that.
So he actually he's got almost like Beethoven. He has to see it now.
Oh really?
Because he can only hear it faintly.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. I guess these days he could probably put like a hearing aid in that would let him hear the music.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. He's a good guy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we should get Paul at Comic-Con. You know, if you remember a thing called Phantom of the Paradise?
Yes.
Yeah, see, he should come to Comic-Con.
I should ask you, the first time you had to do the Kermit songs that you used to sing, was that difficult for you to be able to do that?
Yes. It was very difficult. I was sharing with someone at the table today, they may be in the room, that I was, the first time I remember singing Rainbow Connection live was in a room with, about double this many people in an auditorium someplace. I don't remember what the event was. And, Rainbow Connection starts with the banjo before Kermit sings. It's like a little intro. But as soon as people hear that, they know what you're about to sing. So Kermit's on stage, the lights are coming up. I'm, back there with the puppet. I'm ready to go. I'm all set, voice is in good shape. And the minute the music hit, the audience roared with applause and cheering. And I broke up. It tore me up. So I thought, okay, I have just like 2 bars to get back to the where I sing. Oh my God. And I thought, you know what? I have to figure out how to do this without ever getting emotional. I can't be the guy singing and be emotional as Kermit. So, you get past that. But yeah, it was very hard, very hard. I think Rainbow Connection more than something like Green.
Yeah.
Green is, I can kind of concentrate on that song and get past it. But, if Kermit were here right now to sing Rainbow Connection, you guys would cheer and I would cry. That's what happened. And people cry when they hear it. It's that kind of song, It's a very emotional song,
You can still do it. We love you.
Hey.
Yeah, hey.
So you were saying that how much you love working with Prince and David Bowie.
Oh yeah.
Who is your favorite guest from Sesame Street?
Oh wow, it's funny on Sesame Street. Most of my time there, I did a little bit of Kermit there, but that was during where corporations were splitting up. So Kermit was kind of owned by one group and, not by the other group. And mostly it was Ernie. And and most of what I did with Ernie was we would shoot the Ernie and Bert inserts. We'd do all those in a week, and then they would be dropped into each episode. So I was only on Sesame Street for a week or so. But occasionally Ernie would be on the street, and they would call those show days. You're actually shooting an episode of the series. So when Ernie was on the street, one of my favorite things was when Christopher Reeve was there. Because by this point, he was in the wheelchair and the whole thing. He had the accident. But I had worked with him on the Muppet Show before that, when he was Superman, And he remembered that. And without knowing that I was the guy who was now doing Ernie, he had requested that he get to work with Ernie because Ernie was his favorite character. So suddenly I'm working with Chris Reeve again, So we got to have that time before he passed away, and that was really neat. And he was, it was difficult for him to breathe on some level, but at the same time, he was bound and determined to show that he was absolutely fine. So he and Ernie were doing the alphabet, and I thought, okay, well, I'll probably have to go really slow. Not so. He was like going through it. He was just a great person. So I'd probably say that. We worked with a lot of great people there, but Chris Reeve was a special one.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
What is your favorite puppet character from Jim Henson's Creature Shop?
Wow, from the Creature Shop. Puppet character? Well, the only characters I really performed that would be considered Creature Shop characters were the Skeksis. And while I think they're amazing, it's hard to call them favorites because they were incredibly uncomfortable. Okay, so from a character standpoint, they were great. From a being a side of them standpoint, it was really hard. But just as a viewer, I always loved some of the stuff that ended up. Did any of you guys see the Storyteller series? Yes. Some of that stuff was amazing, and I didn't work on any of that. We were shooting another part of the Jim Henson Hour during that time with the Muppets. But there's one that they did, I don't know the name of it, you guys, somebody may know, where it was all these demons sitting around a table playing cards. And those puppets I just thought were incredible. I'd love to have performed one of those.
The Storyteller gave me inspiration. It's one of the inspirations of an animated series that I wanted to do someday called The Animated Twilight Zone.
Oh, that sounds like fun.
Yeah.
You should do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good question. Yeah, I had less over the years. I had less work with the Creature Shop characters, but I always loved doing it because it was a challenge. The difference between what it takes to make the Muppets slightly more abstract characters seem alive, and then the living, breathing sort of creatures is a little bit more subtle performance. But after doing something like Dark Crystal, I know that carried over for me into performing all the other characters we did. I mean, the Fraggles were zany, but back with Kermit got more and more sort of living, breathing to me. I mean, the manipulation of the puppet got more subtle, and I wanted to do that because I wanted him to be this living entity in the world. He had a life off the screen that many of the fans would know about. You sort of thought he went home after work.
Did you have a favorite Muppet Show or Sesame Street skit?
Oh, let me think. Again, that's hard because there were so many hundreds of them. On the Muppet Show, we did so much work. Wow, how could I choose a favorite? I'm drawing a complete blank. It's like right now my brain is doing a Google search. Favorite Muppet Show skit, and I'm not connecting to the internet. I don't have an answer for you. I mean, frankly, to tell you the honest truth, I loved every moment I was ever on the Muppet Show. I was 18 years old when I joined. It was a dream come true, and I'm working at the feet of these master puppeteers and learning and absorbing and being right there involved in the whole process. Every guest star, even the guest stars that I didn't know who they were, I loved. Some of them were, older than my generation at that point. But the opportunity to work with those people, Bob Hope and Danny Kaye and Gene Kelly and Roy Rogers, it was just incredible. Yeah.
If you had the opportunity to go back and make more Muppet movies, would you?
Yes. Yes, I loved working with the Muppets so much. Oh yeah, it was the best thing ever. And at the point in time when I was out of there, I really felt like whether you liked that ABC series or not, and a lot of people didn't, and I get it. There were things about it I didn't like either. But I think the puppet work in that show was really good. I think our puppetry was great. It's the other side of what we do is trying to make these characters that are the equivalent of a shirt, basically, when they're laying in a chair, like these real living, breathing things. And I think I felt like with Kermit, I learned a lot during the process of shooting those 16 episodes. And finding that, for me, as a puppeteer and an actor, finding a fine line between how zany and abstract they can be, and yet keeping them something that you believe is alive at all times is really fun. It's the challenge of what we always did as the Muppets, trying to hopefully, we all suspend our disbelief and we accept them as something that are alive, Yeah.
What was your favorite Henson project that didn't have Muppet in the title?
Muppet in the title? Well, let's see. We did a couple of interesting things. I mean, I love dinosaurs, which was great fun. Yeah, it was great, right? And that was a Henson Disney co-production back right after Jim passed away. Really a challenge. I mean, talk about a hard show to get done. It was about a 7-day show that we did in 5 days. So the hours were insane. And the characters were all, these mechanical things that would break down every 5 minutes. And, and the poor guys in the Creature Shop were trying to mend them back together with duct tape and wire and keep them going, But at the end of the day, it's a pretty amazing show if you think about it. The state of the art at the time. The writing is very sophisticated and adult and all that. That was a good one.
Series finale.
Yeah, yes, yeah, where they wipe out the entire species. Yeah, yeah.
Next.
Earlier you talked about the scene of Kermit on the bicycle.
Yeah.
Simple setup.
Sure.
I was curious, does anything stand out in your memory as the most complicated puppeteering setup that you were in?
Well, let me think about that for a second. Jim's saying used to be, he'd say simple is good. And then he would go on to do the most complicated thing you could ever dream up. And all I can figure is what he really meant is it's good if it looks like it was simple. Because he was, as I say, he was always trying to put all these different technologies into what we did. Complicated. Well, obviously something like Dark Crystal was extremely complex because all those were practical effects. Every set was an actual set. There was no CG or anything.
I'm thinking in particular,
like Muppet things? Yeah. Wow, let me think. Well, the reason I leaned...
puppeteering job rather than...
The reason I leaned actually something as simple as having the Electric Mayhem Band play a number can get very complicated because it can involve 2 to 3 puppeteers per character sometime, depending on how much, if you're seeing like legs or something, that's crazy. We don't do legs, and very well. But playing the instruments, and we were always really sticklers about, we want this character to look like they're actually playing that guitar or that keyboard. We want you to believe that they're hitting those notes. So we would spend endless hours learning those musical tracks exactly, every note, so that you believe the manipulation, Even that's very complicated. But back to Dark Crystal for a second. In those scenes where you see all the Skeksis in the same chamber around the crystal, you've got, I forgot how many Skeksis there was. Anybody know? It's like a dozen of those. 9, thank you. And each of those Skeksis could have had as many as 7 or 8 people per Skeksis. So you're talking up in the 60s for puppeteers, all trying to coordinate whatever they were doing at one time, You had a whole team if you're inside of this thing, you had a whole team of people crawling around the floor underneath you. You wanted this little pulsing thing here. Well, that was one person doing that pulse, So it was very complicated.
Yeah, it's amazing teamwork.
Oh, it is.
One pupper, that's fantastic.
It's
one scene.
Yeah. It's an amazing thing when you get, even if it's just you and one other performer, when you find that person that you can connect with, and they are able to, if they're assisting you, they're able to follow you almost without you ever planning anything, I work a lot with a guy named Mike Quinn, who's a great puppeteer, and he's done a lot of work on Star Wars. If you guys see him at Comic-Con, it'll be because of his work on Star Wars. But Mike is one of those people who could work alongside me, like running Kermit's right hand or something, and we almost never had to plan anything. Mike just followed what I was doing, and we were in sync. To the point where it didn't matter whether there was a script. We just fell into place and worked together well, That's always amazing when that happens.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks.
Oh, sure.
Okay. What is your most favorite and least favorite Muppet song that you had to perform?
Most favorite, I'm trying to think like stuff on the Muppet Show because we did so much music. More recently, I guess, I'm trying to think of some of the songs we did from the last movies because some of those were amazing. But one of my favorites that I ever did was on Muppets Tonight. We did a Talking Heads song, what's the one? Tell me the name of it, somebody. Yeah, What's a Lifetime? Thank you. All I can think of is water flowing underground. But that was a bizarre thing for Kermit to do, and I had a great time doing it. And one of the least favorites are usually the ones that are the hardest to sing. On the Muppet Show, we did the Hawaiian War Chant. I'll never forget it now. I don't know the rest of my life. I don't know what they mean. But I remember having to memorize that because we had to go to sing it with a bunch of Muppet pigs or something. And I was living on this place called Hampstead Heath, which is a big open green area north of London. We were shooting in England. And I would go out for a walk with my earbuds in and just listen to this over and over and over. So my impression of the Hawaiian War Chant is that it's something you sing when you're walking through England. It makes no sense. There's snow on the ground, but you're singing a Hawaiian song. But that was probably the hardest thing we ever had to actually memorize. Because you couldn't read it, it was too many syllables, you had to know it. Sure.
Hi, Steve.
Hey.
So, out of all the characters you brought to life, who was the most difficult to create the mannerisms for to match the personality?
Oh, that's interesting.